caution. Listening to this podcast may motivate you to make positive changes in your life, identify ways to accelerate your career trajectory, and develop a path towards financial freedom. This is the Career Meets World podcast, and I'm your host, Edward Gorbis. And I've spent the last 10 years focused on helping thousands of people advance their career while in parallel teaching a secret recipe to reach financial independence. And I'm here to share the untold stories of successful people and teach thousands of listeners how to develop a growth mindset. And our minds are malleable, and everyone has the power to change their mindset through perseverance, dedication, and a passion for learning. So if you're ready to skyrocket your business and financial literacy, turn up the volume and let's dive right in. This is the Career Meets World podcast. Welcome back, podcast family. As always, we have an incredible guest for you today. And with us is somebody who is arguably the master at executive presence. And her name is Jessica Chen. She's a trusted communications advisor to several elite tech leaders in the Silicon Valley, as well as in Asia. She is the founder and CEO of Soulcast Media, a business communications agency where she provides high-touch strategies to elevate people's speaking and authority. She's been awarded an Emmy-Award for her work at ABC 10 News and multiple Associated Press awards. And after 10 years in television news, Jessica is on a mission to help professionals, entrepreneurs, and executives build their confidence in speaking authentically and to teach the use of storytelling to create connection and engagement on various media platforms. I'm so excited to share this conversation with Jessica with you today. Welcome, Jessica. It is so nice to have you with us today on the Career Meets World podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time today. First and foremost, how are you? It's been a crazy year. What's on tap for you? And I just really want to understand, how are you doing today?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm absolutely thrilled to be having this conversation with you. 2020 has been a very interesting year. I think for a lot of us, that's kind of like the one word I can describe. It's very interesting. But fortunately, Soulcast Media, we've always been a remote type of agency. So fortunately, it hasn't affected us, too negatively. In fact, because a lot of the work that we do has to do with teaching people how to be better communicators, especially on video. We personally have seen a lot of demand from a business point of view. So that's been kind of an interesting turn of events, I guess, in some case.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say your business has been thriving this year. And I think that's also kind of the fortunate aspect of having a digital online presence, and is you're able to adapt and quickly shift. And for those of you who might not know, I'd love for you, Jessica, to share kind of what is Soulcast Media? How did you kind of give birth to it, and what is it all about?
It really is giving birth. So long story short, before I started Soulcast Media, I was a news reporter. I was in the news industry for almost 10 years. I jumped around because that's kind of what you have to do in the industry in order to move up. My first job was at NBC in Reno, Nevada. My second job, I moved to New York, was working for New York One. And then I jumped back to California, which is where I was born and raised. And I worked for ABC in San Diego. And so after that, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do for my career next. I had 10 years in news. Fantastic experience, got to learn a lot, do a lot, meet a lot of people. But I really felt that I wanted to do something where I could have that one-on-one direct impact. And, with news, the beauty of it is you're impacting on a different level, right? But I was like, I really want to help people become better communicators, because just going around being a reporter, you realize that that's something that a lot of people, would want to learn. And so I was like, well, since I have these skills, public speaking, presentations, storytelling, writing, like these are all things as a journalist, especially in TV, that you have to do. I was like, hey, perhaps I can actually teach this. So what I ended up doing was I started using the LinkedIn platform. That's been huge for my business. And I just started talking about what I know. communications is what I know. And I think for me, what has been interesting is I'm not afraid to tell people that I was not a good communicator starting out. I struggled with communications early on. And like we'll talk about later, and it's a lot of it with cultural childhood, experiences that made me basically very shy and introverted, I would say. So when I teach people communications, I can relate to people's struggles. And so from there, Soulcast Media kind of grew.
I love that. And before we even tap into a lot of wisdom that you could probably disseminate for people, I want to tap into what was the inspiration? Like, what was the motivation to go into this? Because you and I talked about this offline, is that it's often difficult, especially in kind of this immigrant first generation mindset, to have this powerful communication skill. And as you alluded to, it's not necessarily innate. So what was the impetus to even going into media, to wanting to kind of go into this world of media where communication is such a critical piece? It's the important piece of the job. What inspired you to go there?
Mhm. So a lot of people will ask, well, since you were so, first of all, terrified and terrible at communicating, why would you even want to get into broadcast journalism, right? Let's start from there. And so I've always been interested in that industry. Like this is even when I was young. That was one of the traditions. My family and I, we would always watch the 10 o'clock news, Channel 2, in the Bay Area. And so I was always very familiar with watching people on television talking about news. And I was always like, wow, they're so eloquent. They present so well. They have this presence. And I'm here, and I don't mean, I was like a middle schooler, and I was just like, oh, so awkward. Like I gravitated towards watching people who are good communicators. So to me, that was like already something. It really wasn't until college and then I started doing the internships so I went to UC San Diego. There's no journalism program at UC San Diego. So really you have to cut your chops doing internships. So I did a bunch of internships when I was in college. And that's when I was like, okay, this is really what I want to do. And I felt this industry would have been the best, how can you say, the best testing ground for me to really learn these skills, because you are forced to put yourself out there. You're forced to communicate. You're forced to do all these things to help you become a better communicator. And I really felt, well, there's no better industry to learn these things. Of course, there's also a love for journalism and everything that goes into it. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do this. So that's what I did.
I love that. I always say that when people are in perfect alignment with what they want in life, you start to seek out opportunities. You start to kind of ask yourself the right questions. How do I even end up in the right place?
Mhm.
So you graduated UC San Diego. You wanted to tap in. What was that process to actually get that first job and step into it? Because look, especially when we're kind of having these Hail Mary effects and we want to kind of leap and jump into something brand new, it's not always easy to make that connection. So what was that process like for you?
So when I graduated college, I knew that it was going to be very hard for me to get that first reporter job. And the reason why is because I didn't graduate from, USC's like, top tier journalism program, or again, we didn't have a journalism program. So I knew it'd be very hard. But I did the typical thing, I sent out my resume, reached out to people via email, and, trickling types of response, but nothing really. So I love telling the story. I think this was maybe like, so I graduated in June, and I think I moved home back to the Bay Area. And then perhaps like in August, I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm not getting any leads here. Like no one's calling me back. I mean, I have everything, my reel, my resume, but nobody is like granting me these interviews, right? It always starts with the first interview. So no joke, what I did was I actually packed my car with like basically a few days worth of stuff. And I drove up and down the California coast, knocked on the doors of these news stations, and basically was like, hey, news director, my name is Jessica Chen. I'm literally here in town right now. Will you see me? And because I was willing to do that, I was able to actually get these interviews with these television stations who I had previously reached out to, who previously ignored my email. But it was because I said, I'm here. I'm literally outside your door. There's that urgency. They were willing to meet me. So that's kind of how it all started.
It's such a powerful story, and I appreciate you sharing that. What I've learned in any aspect of what I'm going to call networking, which is exactly what you're doing, is oftentimes I'd say 95% of people never follow up at least once, let
Mm.
alone drive across California and knock on people's doors, which is a powerful form of networking. But if you're going to take anything away from that story, is remember that learning to network and follow up and have that consistency is really going to separate you from the rest of the herd, from the pack, and give you an opportunity to actually talk to the right people. So you got in the door. I know it's not easy to step into that light. And I think you learned a lot. You went through those experiences. What was one of the biggest struggles or challenges that you had to overcome through stepping into the world of media?
So, well, there's two aspects. Obviously, it's the work itself, it's a huge learning curve. And, when you are a reporter and you're starting out, being a reporter in your first market is not so different than you being in your third or fourth market, in the sense that you're still the one reporting the news, you're still the one in front of the camera talking about the news, like you're that person. I will say, so there's that learning curve that you have to learn, especially for me. I didn't necessarily study journalism, so I had to learn it on the spot, and make sure that as I was learning it, it was actually legit going to be broadcasted on television. So just trusting that, oh my gosh, like this is not journalism school. This is like legit working at NBC now, you know? So that was hard, but obviously, you put in the work and you really study as you work. And then the other part was the lifestyle aspect of the job was very tough. I was 21 years old living in Reno, Nevada. All my friends were living in San Francisco, New York City, Seattle. And I'm like, hey guys, can you come visit me in Reno? Yeah, no, not really. So, that lifestyle was very hard. And then of course, moving around, that's tough too.
So we often glamorize different roles and companies and professions. And oftentimes, especially early on, as you just mentioned, we're surprised, right? You
Mhm.
end up in a different world, in a different city. You end up in Reno, Nevada, and you don't get to do all these things that you'd probably want to do as a young adult. So always keep in mind, whatever career you want to pursue, there's always some other challenge that comes with it or something to overcome. Through that process, you learn communication, you kind of put yourself out there. Was there anything that like scared you or really created this sort of limiting belief that I'm not going to be able to do this? Or were you able to consistently persevere and just take every challenge to the next step? And if that's the case, what is it about Jessica that really motivates you to just keep going and figuring things out?
I think it's having that end goal, or and we've talked about this before, that why, like why am I doing this? Why am I putting my time and effort into something when, 95% of the times it's not that glamorous, right? So for me, I consistently just kind of, quote unquote, sucked it up when things got tough, because for me, I knew my current state of distress wasn't going to be permanent. Right. Like, if I'm having a crappy day, this is just a crappy day. Perhaps tomorrow will be better, but let's look at my 2-year long goal, my 5-year long goal. This is not what it's going to look like, right? So I think just being mindful of whatever, crap you're feeling in that moment, you have to be, you have to think, okay, well, this isn't permanent. So that's even relevant today, in what I do at Soulcast Media.
No, exactly. And I love the fact that you're keen on planning and realizing that whatever is that end goal in mind for that moment in life or that job or your particular moment in that career, you have a plan, you have a goal, and whatever minor setback you might have, it's temporary, right? And at the end of the day, whatever happens in that particular moment is only a reflection of the meaning that we give that problem or issue. So I love the fact that you're able to consistently persevere and you've learned a ton, right? Like that's why you started Soulcast Media. So before we even tap into that, what were your biggest takeaways? Like, what are some of the communication skills that you not only teach your clients today, but you also would just generally share with friends, family, coworkers, whoever it might be about, let's call it the 3 top tips for communication?
So when you are, well, for me, when I'm a my foundation, it being journalism and it being television, we are very mindful of a few things, right? We're very mindful of how we use our tone of voice, right? The way we're talking, the difference between speaking with your stomach voice versus like your throat voice, and when you utilize it in what circumstance, the effect of how to use your body language. When we're on television, for example, we are very strategic with when we use our hands. And that is because, when we're using our hands, we're really trying to engage you in that moment to signal to you that, hey, this is a really important point, or I want to show you something, right? So it's being mindful of things that typically people don't think about. And, I always say, I don't know if we talked about this, but like the 80-20 rule, like that's like with everything. And even in communications, right? It's like people are like, well, I just talk and I don't really think about it. And I always say, 80% of the time, that's probably fine. It really doesn't matter how you talk. But it's those 20% of those times, those high stakes situation, right? Where you're trying to make an impression, you're doing a public speaking engagement, or you're doing a meeting and you're talking. Those are the 20% where you do have to think about your tone of voice, your body language, your choice of words, right? So that's kind of what I what I took away from it, and what I now tell people when it comes to communications.
Hey there, listeners. I just wanted to pop in and let you know that as a part of Career Meets World, I am now taking on exclusive one-on-one clients who are hungry leaders or entrepreneurs and want to learn how to succeed under immense pressure. I believe that being an effective business leader is equal parts understanding your subconscious and developing and executing a personalized growth plan. These two aspects continually build upon each other, and my coaching practice is designed to amplify your confidence levels and provide you a toolkit to thrive in any situation. Career Meets World is the ultimate achievement partner, and we support our clients with an always-on approach. So if you're ready to unleash your wildest leadership potential and take control of your success, find Career Meets World or me personally, Edward Gorbis, on LinkedIn and shoot me a short message about your goals with the title, Let's Start. And now it's time to get back to today's episode. Yeah, it's so powerful. I think we can apply the Pareto Principle or the 80-20 rule to about anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to have that distinction when it comes to communication. And I'll share a story with you. I don't know if I've actually shared this ever on the podcast, but similar to your journey, I was a terrible communicator early on. I had no idea. I was terrified. And bless my mom, I love her. She allowed me and entertained the idea that I wanted to become a model. So I wanted to become a model when I was 12 years old. I don't know why, but maybe similar to you, I kind of glorified the people on television and really wanted to stand out, stick out. And she said, okay, I'm going to pay thousands of dollars for you to go to modeling school. Let's just say I never landed a gig. I maybe learned how to or walk down a runway. But what my mom always claims to fame is that whole process taught me how to be confident, taught me how to speak, taught me how to use my hands and be vocal and pause in the right moments and really have that power internally. So I'm so grateful I had that experience, because the reality is I don't know what would have taught me better communication. And what you're alluding to resonates so much with me right now, because when we're mindful about how we speak,
Mm-hmm.
we show up more powerfully in the world. And I think ultimately every individual would want to convey whatever their talents or gifts are in a much more powerful way. So I appreciate that you were sharing that and you're alluding to that. And what's really cool is that you've taken all of this experience and you've packaged it up into obviously your company, which is continuously growing and thriving. I can't wait for 2021 and see what happens for you there. But really, you created some powerful courses that help people communicate better. So I'd love to learn, what are these courses about? What do they teach people? And how do people get a hold of them?
Mm-hmm. So it's twofold, and you're right. We have a lot of e-courses that we've created. So one are the ones that we created ourselves. So me and my small team, we are the ones that are producing it, shooting it, writing it. And we have them obviously on our website that people want to watch and learn from. All taught by me, all skills that I use myself. The second aspect is the LinkedIn Learning part, which is LinkedIn Learning is a huge platform where they also hire a bunch of thought leaders in their industries to create specific courses, always related to business and career and things like that, right? So I have 3 with LinkedIn that are currently out there that people can watch. The most popular one being how to develop executive presence on video, which given 2020, a lot of people are very curious about this subject now. But I have 2 other ones which are about, pitching, right? So how you can create a pitch, not only for, investors, but like how do you pitch an idea to your boss, right? So that's one that's relevant. And then the third one that just came out a few weeks ago was teaching people how to be more confident speaking up at work. And that one was actually a very personal one for me when I was creating it, because I was truly writing it from a place where I was like, I understand the struggle. So let me talk about the emotions and the fear. But then, of course, we created a course out of that. I have 3 more in the works with LinkedIn. So it's an ongoing process. So it's exciting.
I love it. You're constantly creating, you're constantly building. And I know you're super keen on executive presence. Can you give us the Jessica definition of what that really means?
So executive presence, I always say, is actually broken down into these 3 things. And the analogy I always give is if you want to make a dish, for example, like I want to make this pasta dish, and you look at a recipe, there are 3 categories. You have to think about your carbs, let's say like your protein and the vegetables that you want to put into your pasta, right? So in executive presence, the 3 categories I say it's how you make other people feel. That's the first element that makes up executive presence. How you carry yourself, things like your mannerisms, your attire. And the third is how you communicate. You need these 3 elements to build your executive presence. Of course, you can break it down even further, which then I call the ingredients that go into each category. But from a high level, executive presence is made up of these 3 things. And if you want executive presence, you want to think about these 3 things.
Okay. I love that. So if you're somebody listening and you're really keen on improving your communication skills, you might have some fears that creep in, and both Jessica and I alluded to what ours were. I think it's natural for human beings to experience that type of fear, especially when they want to be prolific and profound communicators. It's not an easy skill to master, and both you and I are continuously figuring it out ourselves. So check those out on LinkedIn or on Soulcast Media. I highly, highly recommend them. So, Jessica, before we let you off the hook, as we do with every single one of our guests, we put you through the hot seat where I'm going to ask you a couple of personalized questions to try to stump you. So, I want to ask you, are you ready?
Oh gosh, I'm afraid, but it's okay. Let's do it.
Let's do this. All right. You are developing courses consistently. If you could develop one course outside of communication, what would it be?
This is gonna sound really funny. It's kind of related to communications, but like maybe like dating, something like that.
Right.
Like dating 101 and how to like have these like small talk conversations. I know it's kind of communications related, but it's not business. It's like dating. So that'd be kind of a fun one to create.
There we go. Coming soon. Probably not to LinkedIn, but some other platform. All right. Question number 2. If you had an opportunity to strip away the Hollywood sign and put up any message you want up there, what would it be?
Like for me or for the business?
For the world, let's say that. If you could communicate any message to the world, doesn't matter what it is, what would
Mhm.
it be?
I think it's everyone is going through their own struggles and figuring out shit. Sorry. They're figuring out things on their own, right? And I think, the truth is, even though Soulcast Media, it looks like this, I'm doing this, but kind of like, the down and dirty stuff, it's really stressful. And it's like, it's not, nothing is as glamorous as it seems. Like, so that's kind of what I will always say. Nothing is as good as it seems. Nothing is always as bad as it seems.
Got it. Last question for you. If you had to read one book for the rest of the time and you couldn't read anything else, what would the book be?
One of the most profound books that I've read, and I love Brene Brown. She's my favorite author. I don't know if this is the way she writes, but I love her books. But the one that really did it for me was Daring Greatly. I really like that one.
Never read it. What's it about? I'm just curious. Quick follow-up.
Yeah, it's just a book about, so a lot of her work is about like vulnerability and building that confidence. And, for me, I always love those types of books. I love books that really inspire you. And for her, she's talking about things like shame, vulnerability, and how to like break out of those feelings. And she really puts it into context that makes you think of like, it not necessarily being a bad thing and how you can overcome it. I can't explain it as well as she can, but all I know is every time I read that book, I walk away thinking, oh my God, I can do anything.
It's powerful. So no surprise that's the number one book you're going to read if that's the only thing you could. Before we jump off, I want to make sure that our audience can connect with you and learn from you and maybe take some of your courses if that's something that would help them in their life or in their process for communication. What's the best way to communicate or to connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm very active on LinkedIn, like I mentioned. My page is Jessica Chen, or you can do Jessica Chen page. That'll be the first thing that pops up. Like you mentioned, the e-courses, if people want more of that like passive learning on your own schedule. One of the other things that we have is we have a membership program. And so that is where people actually have access to me. They meet with me every month, and I actually am teaching them a new communications topic and answering any communications questions that they may have. So there's different ways for those who want to actually start learning how to be a better communicator with Soulcast Media. It's all on our website, soulcastmedia.com.
Awesome. So make sure to check that out. I know that even personally for me, from where I was in my modeling days to where I am today, there's a lot for me to learn. And I actually have it on my calendar to take your course, the executive presence one. So I definitely am looking forward to that because there's so much for us to learn. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter if you're one of the most notable anchors on television. They're constantly improving. They're constantly learning because the world is constantly evolving. It's that simple. Jessica, thank you so much for joining us today. I genuinely appreciate it. And as we always say on Career Meets World, go unleash your wildest potential. Hey, thanks so much for listening to the Career Meets World podcast. I would love to get to meet you. There are a couple of ways we can connect. You know I love my LinkedIn. Simply search for Career Meets World or Edward Gorbis and feel free to connect. Second is via Instagram at Career Meets World. And third is through our website. I have a special spot for you full of fun, free resources. All you have to do is go to careermeetsworld.com, subscribe to our newsletter, and we'll provide you the free resources to help you boost your career and reach financial freedom. And if this podcast was helpful to you in any way, please consider rating and reviewing this podcast on Apple Podcasts. This helps us help more people. Simply tap the rate with 5 stars and leave a sentence with what you liked about the podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, strengthening your growth mindset is your ticket to success. I'm Edward Gorbis, and we'll catch you on next week's episode.